Hello and welcome to the October Decoder Dialogue. My name is Maria Krasinski. I'm the Managing Director at News Decoder. And for those joining us for the first time, News Decoder is an educational nonprofit based in Paris, France. And our mission is to empower young people to be civically engaged, active global citizens using the tools and techniques of journalism. And our Decoder Dialogue series is a monthly convening of students, educators, professionals from our global network. We bring them together around the virtual roundtable to discuss and decode the big topics of the day. Topics have ranged from democracy to climate to youth mental health, and today's topic, artificial intelligence. But before we get into that discussion, I just want to give a few logistical notes. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared to News Decoder's website in the coming days. So if anyone misses it or you want to share out, we will have that link available for everybody. We're going to open with discussions and questions among our panelists and then open the floor to Q&A. So we really want this to be a dialogue and to hear from you, our audience. So if you could drop your questions in the Q&A box, we will be monitoring that throughout the evening. And now, with that out of the way, I'd like to introduce you all to our moderator for today's session. Sabine Berzina is News Decoder's User Experience Manager for the Proms Project, which focuses on youth citizen journalism and media literacy. She has worked as a journalist and a fact checker before pivoting to media education. And with that said, I'm going to turn things over to Sabine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Sabine, and I'm very excited to start with our discussion today. And as usual for News Decoder, we have several brilliant panelists from all around the world. So let's meet them. Violetta, why don't you start?
Hi, I'm Violetta. I'm a junior in high school at the moment, and I'm currently studying abroad in France, but normally I live in Rhode Island in the US.
Aryan?
Yes, my name is Aryan Mesley. I'm studying global communication at the American University of Paris right now. I'm a curator, photographer, storyteller, and communication specialist, and currently living in Paris since 2 years.
Eunice?
Hi everyone, I'm Eunice Inema Emrandiz. I'm currently doing Bachelor's of Arts in Communication in Southern New Hampshire University and the Keppel College. I'm a dancer, I'm a traditional dancer, a passionate Emrandiz. Thank you.
And to introduce you to our guest experts today, Sonali?
Hello, thank you. I'm a journalist by background who moved into the machine learning product space. At the moment, I lead the Generative AI initiative at the International News Media Association, and I also work as a consultant helping news companies understand how they can best use generative AI and other forms of AI. Thank you for having me.
We're so happy to have you. We also have, and we're happy to have an educator with us, Johan.
My name is Johan Sköld, and I'm a teacher in Swedish, Swedish as a second language, and German. And I also work as a lead teacher in ICT, and I also am an Apple Distinguished Educator. I'm from Sweden.
And the last but not least, Nikita.
Hi everyone, I'm Nikita. I am a data scientist who entered the news industry founding my own media company. I'm currently a Knight Fellow at the International Center for Journalists. I host the Newsroom Robots podcast, and I also do a lot of AI training and advisory for newsrooms globally, and lead the AI journalism lab at the City University of New York. I'm currently based in Toronto, Canada.
All right. It's really nice to have all of you here, and thanks a lot for taking part in this. But before we get on with our discussion on how AI has changed education and journalism, we have a poll for the audience we'd like to start with. I will let my colleague open it up. It's a very general question to measure the average temperature in the room. Do you think AI is more helpful or more harmful? Of course, there can be a ton of ifs and buts for everyone, but please do let us know what your gut feeling says. I'll give you a little bit of time, a few seconds to answer. So do you think AI is more helpful or more harmful? A countdown? 3, 2, 1. Okay. Let's close the poll. Okay. We are divided, of course, but way less divided than I would have thought maybe before this webinar. We are quite optimistic in this crowd. 76% think that AI is more helpful in general. 24% think it's more harmful. But it's not just our audience today that is somewhat divided. The opinions in the broader society and on our panel are a little bit divided as well. This is the Global Media Literacy Week, but also we are getting near a 2-year mark since ChatGPT was introduced to the broader public. And since then, everyone's wondering what will happen. Will students cheat more and as the result know less? Or will they use AI chatbots smartly and quickly surpass people from previous generations in terms of what they're able to do at an early age? And also, for the sake of our own future at News Decoder, we want to know, what about news? Together with our project partners at a youth publishing platform, Mobile Stories, we recently developed an AI guide for our student journalists. My colleague will drop the link in the chat. But we want to know also about the influence on the media more broadly. Will we see more low-quality spam or unlock new opportunities to produce ambitious stories fast and help them reach the right people? Our student panelists have thoughts and observations on many of those questions, so I want to start with them. Eunice, you have said that you use AI as your assistant, and at the same time, you see the risk of trusting AI more than you trust yourself. So Eunice, could you tell us more? What do you mean by that?
Will you please repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, you said that you use AI as your assistant. So could you talk a little bit more? What do you mean by that? And why do you see risk in trusting AI more than you trust yourself?
Thank you for that. Starting with the part where I said I use AI as my assistant, I use it generally during school projects. Like I need to learn more. It's not that easy to go navigate into different resources online, doing a lot of research. It's not that easy. But when you use AI, I can ask a question. I learn from it, like see what it's telling me and maybe compare with what I already tried to search before instead of doing thorough research. And in that way, I'm going to have a bigger view of what I'm talking about or what I need to answer. And I can use it in my own thinking, depending on what I have to answer. It's like it's adding more ideas to me, and I will learn from it, and it also it's going to help me do my work faster and easier. But the problem, again, coming back to the next part of it's more dangerous to rely on it and trust it more than I trust myself. If I am studying to get a degree to do something in the future or change the world, and I'm trusting AI more than I'm trusting myself, then in the end, it's not me doing the thing, it's AI who is doing it for me. And it's like I'm being addicted or okay, in the end, we can become addicted or like slaves to the AI without, if we do not learn how to monitor it, we'll always have to be able to do something after having an approval from the AI thingy or the research we made from the AI. Anything, I'm not going to trust it because I'm more and more addicted to it and trusting what it's giving me more than I trust what I can do myself. Well, it's even going to improve laziness in me. Like I can do more research. Let me use AI, stuff like that. It's a little bit dangerous.
Thank you so much, Eunice. It's a really great point. And as all of us are learning more about this tech, there's a large risk on relying on it too much, especially since we don't always know what goes into the answers and how come we're seeing what we're seeing there. And that's why it's great to have conversations like this and learn. Therefore, Aryan, I would like to involve you now because Eunice uses AI for her studies, and we're all thinking about its impact here. But you have noticed how the use, the discussion, and the hype is not all equal everywhere. could you share what you've observed while living in Afghanistan and in France?
Yes, of course. Um, I mean, based on my observation and experience, especially when I first came to France 2 years ago, I think depending on which country, like AI and using AI is viewed more in the context of opportunity versus threat, and also optimism versus pessimism in two countries. And this perception is influenced by several factors. Like, for example, the first factor is the general understanding and assumption of what AI is and what it does and what is capable of. For example, I have had experience like with students at my university that they actually know what AI is and they're fine with it. And back home, like I've had experiences with people who don't know at all what AI is, so that people like there's a imbalance between understanding of what AI is in these two countries, which actually doesn't help at all to really understand what AI is. But yeah, I mean, to some extent that's the problem. And the second factor that I have noticed is the user experience with AI. Like for example, some people actually know what they're dealing with. For example, the students who learn coding or who learn data science, they actually know what they're dealing with and they're using it pretty much a lot in their daily life tasks. So they're fine with it. And there are people who actually are afraid of using it because they're afraid that using AI would somehow undermine and discredit their cognitive ability, like critical thinking and thinking with complexity when it comes to their studies. And also, some people have applied some disciplinary usage of AI in their daily task, and they're also fine with it because they use it. They have a balance in using AI in their workplace or academics, and they're pretty much optimistic about it. And the third factor that I've realized is that, especially in Afghanistan, just because people do not have means and access to internet, and especially like even mobile devices, they don't know at all what AI is, and they're not aware of what AI could pose to them, like for example, as an opportunity or threat compared to experiences in the West. So I mean, there's always benefits and also cost to using AI in like two different countries, which all depends on whether they have access to it or not.
Thank you a lot for sharing that, Aryan, and that's definitely true. Also, being in Latvia, I can see that you can even have internet access and no problems with it for most of the population. But the output and what you can get still differs a lot because Latvian is a very small language, and the answers that you get, their accuracy, the amount of information there, it's just very different um, for a small language and one that is spoken in a lot of parts of the world. But in the US, where Violetta is from, there's definitely a lot of talk about it in her school, in the media, constant chatter. So, Violetta, as I talked to you previously, I learned that you are cautious not only as a student, but also as a media consumer. So, could you share what worries you and why are you saying that the presence of AI in the media has made you revert to trusting paper formats more?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's just reverting to paper forms, but more as forms where you can directly check sources. Something I've noticed in both schoolwork when I have to research certain topics or mainly research, but also in my daily life with just reading news and like engaging in media, is that it's really with the way that social media, I think especially has become present, and with AI's use in social media and in general, it's become really easy to lose the train of sources. One thing can get cited improperly and then it just spirals and it can be credibly cited as a real source, when it's actually something someone just said. And I feel like that has become more prevalent with AI, which makes me nervous when if I'm just going to open up an article by what you would normally consider a trustworthy source, that it's actually something that's not real, something that you cannot fact check. So really just in general, I wouldn't say it's just AI, but the structure that the media has created in general.
Violeta, thank you so much. It's a really great point, and it has come up, previously, and what the panels have been saying. It's often not very transparent, and that causes concern. So, Nikita, we do hear a lot of distrust here, and I want to involve you because you are talking to a lot of journalists and news leaders for your podcast, Newsroom Robots, and also AI in the Newsroom newsletter. We are mostly talking about chatbots or image generators and how they will impact the media, but there are actually many more ways how we can see AI in journalism. I would love for you to talk about some examples that you're seeing and why, at the same time, newsroom leaders are actually also quite cautious.
Yeah, thank you, Sabine. And I can hear the concerns over AI, and this is something that I'm seeing across industries, really, and especially within the news industry. A lot of journalists are very hesitant in just even using AI, and I think it comes from a lack of understanding of really understanding how this technology can be implemented for good. Because, as you said, our AI seems to be this black box where we're not able to understand what's happening and how is it coming up with its conclusions. And I think one real focus that we as an industry really need to talk a lot about is explainable AI. How does a model make its decisions? Where is this data coming from? And helping educate everybody on it. But we see so many ways in which AI is already helping newsrooms. I'd categorize them in like two ways. There's one in like internal workflow optimization, and then there's a lot of like audience-facing experiences where that's happening. So in internal workflow optimizations, a lot of things in terms of just like very routine tasks, converting audio interviews into transcripts, helping journalists with that. It's one of the most basic ways. But apart from that, one of the first things that a lot of newsrooms did was helping them with like their headlines and generating suggestions for that. Or also when you put up an article, you have to add in metadata for your search engine so that your article shows up on Google search. Those are a lot of like routine tasks that goes apart from, in addition to an article that a journalist has written, needs operations, needs a team to do that. And those are places where some of the most valuable use cases, the quickest use cases, I would say, the low-hanging fruits of AI. But apart from that, the stuff that really I find very encouraging is how AI has been used in data journalism and investigative journalism to help people find information that they probably would not have been able to before without the use of AI. And one of my favorite examples to talk about is this small newsroom called I Tromsø in Norway. They built out a tool called Gin, and what it basically does is it helps their journalists find daily stories from municipal archives, government documents, government web portals, by automatically summarizing documents and alerting their journalists on what could be potential stories. So just imagine before, these journalists would have to go manually to every single web portal, see if the new information that has been posted is anything newsworthy, and then go on to see if they could write a story. But now they have this interface which automatically summarizes the new information and alerts journalists. So that's one of the key things, because when I spoke to the product manager, Rune Jutterberg at iTromsø, he was talking about how it took them from spending about 2 hours a day, their journalists now spend just 20 minutes a day, and they produce not just more journalism, but better journalism, because they were able to find a lot more useful stories. And then on the other side, I would say audience facing, we're moving away from just like text on articles to conversational experiences that a lot of newsrooms are currently trying. The Washington Post has something like a climate answers bot, which is based on all of their climate coverage. And one of my very favorite examples to talk about is Aftonbladet from Sweden, one of Scandinavia's largest newsroom, actually. They have an EU election chatbot that they had launched during the EU elections, which is usually tends to be not as much of an engaging news topic. And they saw people over 160,000 questions were queried during that period. And one of the key successes for them was that people were willing to log in and have a conversation with this chatbot, which is not typical for them. And so almost half of the people were having a conversation. And so you're seeing this like new way in which news is going to be presented. News is becoming more interactive and conversational with the help of AI. So a lot more than just robots writing articles, because that's actually been there since 2014 when AP has been having that. But there's a lot more difference in what generative AI is now able to specifically help newsrooms with.
Thanks a lot. I see that we have a question or a remark from audience, so go ahead.
Yes, I have a question. Like a few days ago, I was listening to a webinar by the previous Washington Post director that they were talking about like how is AI is influencing journalism right now. And this has been also my question for a long time because I've been a photographer for a long time and I'm curating a platform right now for photography. And my question to Nikita is that like how does journalism or journalists operate in a field that you can create a very believable picture and of a public figure, especially in times of elections right now, and pass it off as a real picture because like with the advancement of AI, it's really difficult to really tell what is truth and what is not. It's really difficult. I mean, it's because it's not just because of us, it's because AI is advancing so fast compared to like human advancement, like improvement. So and I was wondering what's your opinion on that because we are living in a post-truth era where like opinions and facts are less influential and the attention is coming very low and people do not, I mean, care as they cared a lot like before. So and I was wondering what's your opinion on that.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think we're in a post-truth era, and with AI, hopefully people are going to see the value of journalism, where we really are the people at the front lines trying to figure out the information, what is truth, what is false over there. And one of the key things I can tell you with news industries who are very carefully experimenting with this technology, image generation, photorealistic images is not even on the table. If they are using image generation, it's a lot for illustrations. And that's one of the main things in guidelines of like not deceiving audience members because they never want to lose the trust. So anything that would be stand in terms of like losing trust is out of there. It's not at all on the table for them in terms of even experimenting with it. What I can tell you in terms of we are going to see a lot more initiatives that are coming forward to help people understand if something is created with AI or not. And one of that is the Adobe Content Authenticity Initiative. Highly encourage checking them out. It's a coalition of multiple newsrooms partnering with Adobe, even camera operators, to be able to add in like a metadata, a code to say if something is actually generated with a camera or if it is AI generated. And actually, if you go on to LinkedIn, and if you see pictures right on the top left hand, you will see something like called CC. And if you tap on it, it will actually tell you if you an AI generated image, if it's an AI generated image, if it's from OpenAI, where it was created, when it was created, stuff like that. So we're going to see slowly a lot of like social media platforms are partnering with Adobe to get this out. These content credentials that they call is going to be there. But that's when you're relying a lot on the traditional fact-checking methods, right? And fact checkers, when if the Pope is wearing Balenciaga and is out there and it looks super realistic, one of the first things is of asking one of the most critical questions is like, who else, how many other pictures are there? Because it's not just that one picture. If Pope is wearing Balenciaga in the middle of the city, everybody's going to have their phones out and capturing multiple pictures of that. And that's where the journalism and the fact checkers come in, asking a lot of these critical questions and helping us find the truth. So I think we're going to see, and hopefully a lot of the value of fact checkers is going to be, it's going to become much more important in this AI-driven world.
All right, thank you so much. So many interesting examples and use cases, one of them very inspiring from Sweden. And we are going to hear a little bit more from Sweden, from Johan, who is a teacher and likes to experiment with using AI because it allows to tailor the learning materials, especially to students who are overcoming some challenges, like students who are from migration background and are still learning the main language of the instruction, or students with disabilities. So, Johan, could you talk a little bit more and explain how AI helps you?
I think it helped me and my students in particular in many ways. For instance, it makes individualized support easier. I can adapt all the material, the content to match the unique needs of the students. And I also think that, for instance, you can receive targeted vocabulary. You can make grammar exercises that cater to their current proficiency. So I think that's one thing. And another thing is accessibility. One thing I really like with AI is that you can talk with it. And for many students, a lot of my students have special needs. A lot of my students come from other countries and are in the beginning of their Swedish journey, and they need it all the time. And I think they would have more problems reaching the upper secondary school in Sweden if they didn't learn AI. And I think it's really important that we teach students about AI and what it can do for them. And most important, I think it is for students who are from, areas where maybe they don't have a parent who can help them. I think if we don't do that, we have more differences in the future in school. We do a lot of experimental things in the classroom. I think most of them are good. Some are failures, but for instance, we give the AI a role. For instance, we can ask him, "Can you be a pine tree?" And then the students can ask their own questions. What questions would you have to a pine tree if you would meet one, or to a fox or an owl or some animal in the forest? And that's also nice, I think, that the students can create their own questions. It's not me as a teacher who asks the questions. I can start with these questions of the students. I think also the real-time feedback that they can get from the AI is also a great thing. As you noticed, I'm positive to AI. I think the problem is that we have not the time to discuss whether we should have it or not, because it's there and it's really fast. And in the school in Sweden right now, we have a discussion: shall we go to the more analog way? Shall we use more books and not let the students learn these new tools? And I think that's a completely wrong way to go. Because I think with AI, you can really encourage, and the importance in the classroom is that they are curious, the students. And when the students get to know AI and know that it's there, they can always get an answer. What's important to do it with the students. I think we have AI as a third part in the classroom. And then we can ask AI, and I can, as a teacher, discuss with the student, is this reliable? Is it not? Because that's also important, I think, that we must understand everything is not true that comes out. But yeah, I have many things to tell, but I think I stop there.
Thank you so much, Johan. We'll definitely hear from you some more. But that sounds like such a fun way to learn, chatting with pine trees. But something that's really important here is the tailoring, the personalization, and that is something that Sonali has been working with for a while now, and since before the current AI hype. So we see the recommendation systems on Netflix and Spotify, but could you explain how that works in journalism? What is it that it can help accomplish? And why the top articles in the homepages of some newsrooms are still picked by human editors?
Thank you. Yes. So personalization is a huge opportunity with AI, right? Because I worked at the Globe and Mail, which is Canada's national newspaper, for 15 years. So we used to produce 150 articles a day. And if you think about your own news consumption habits, you're probably not reading 150 articles a day. Maybe you're reading 4, maybe you're reading 14. But there's a lot of content out there. So how can you find what's relevant to you? AI is obviously hugely helpful, whether it's the chat products that Nikita and Johan both mentioned, that lets you ask exactly for what you're looking for, or whether it's, as you said, Sabina, the recommendation engine. So, for example, I live in Toronto, and I'm originally from India. So you can reasonably surmise that I would be interested in news both about Toronto, what's the weather like, or what's happening in municipal politics, but also news that is of interest to others in the Indian diaspora. And so a recommendation system that helps me find what's useful to me, what's relevant to me, is something that pretty much every news organization in the world has now put in place over the past 15 to 20 years, because they realize that if you can show news consumers what is relevant to them, then they will come back to you more often. They'll read more of what you present to them, and you become an indispensable part of their life. And it's so important to have a free press for democracy, right? It's so important to have well-informed citizens, which I know is the mandate of News Decoder as well. One thing, though, is that you always need to have a human in the loop, no matter what form of AI you're using, whether it's generative AI or whether it's old-fashioned AI, which is what a lot of recommendation systems are based on. It's really important that you always have a human in the loop so that you can understand what it is that is being served to your news consumers. Because at the end of the day, if you're the editor of a newspaper or a news site, the responsibility lies with you for making sure that what is being presented is fair, balanced, unbiased. You can't just say, oh, well, the machine offered it to them. No, and everyone I know in the news industry actually takes this responsibility very seriously. We know that our credibility and the trust of people who come to us is the most important thing. And it's not something you want to play around with. It's not something you want to take any chances with. So one thing which you touched upon was how the top stories, for example, on the Globe and Mail homepage or on the Times of India's homepage, are always placed there by humans. In the case of the Globe, it's because we decided when I worked there that we wanted the whole country to be aware of what the important conversations are that they should be considering, rather than giving everyone a slightly different experience or a very different experience. There's some things that are important for everyone to know, and these stories will be on the top of the page, regardless of whether anyone's reading them, anyone's sharing them, anyone's subscribing because of them. It's just that this is an important topic, and often this would be something boring. But as a news organization, we take it very seriously that we present you with not just, stuff that's interesting, but also stuff that's important. And so for that reason, there would always be the top 3 packages, which were placed there by editors based on how important those articles are, rather than just engaging.
Thank you so much. Still something about that human touch and human oversight that we cannot escape. I also want to remind the members of the audience that you can place your questions at the Q&A that you see below. Please do. We want to hear from you. We want to talk to you. But before that, I still want to use the privilege that I have of asking some questions. There's an interesting way how AI in education and in journalism meet. So Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism asked a similar question as we did at the very start, but made it a little bit less general. They asked if AI will make different fields better or worse, and say they divided it in different fields. And people are overall positive about impact on education, but they are quite distrusting in AI and journalism. And that's also something that is very important to consider. I want to ask you, what do you all think about this? And if you have any thoughts on why AI in education is trusted a little bit more? And how should journalists work with AI not to lose audience trust? I see that Sonali has some remarks.
Yeah. So based on what I've seen, studies such as the one the Reuters Institute did or the BBC has done show that your audience is actually comfortable with you using AI in different ways and very uncomfortable with you using it in other ways. So for example, if you're using, I think all of us here use some form of email where there's an autocomplete in the sentence. Now, it suggests words to complete your sentence. If you're doing that, you're a human in the loop. You're looking at it and you're like, yeah, that's not quite right. I'm not going to use the word it suggested. Your audience is okay with that. If you're using Excel or spell check, these are technological tools. Your audience will not say, oh, why did you use Excel instead of using a calculator or doing it all in your head? But what they are uncomfortable with is this idea that you give the machine unfettered control and let it just run amok, let it create any kind of content, let it distribute it any way it wants. That's what makes people really uncomfortable. What's also interesting is the difference in attitudes between different parts of the world and different generations. Younger people tend to be much more comfortable with news that is produced with the help of AI. And in some parts of the world, they actually have digital avatars doing the news. You have a digital TV anchor, and humans are not particularly uncomfortable with that. Again, it depends on how transparent we are about disclosing what's what. As Nikita said, we don't do a Gen AI illustration and pretend that it's real. That makes people very uncomfortable. What we might do is use Gen AI to create a graphic depiction of something, or an infographic, or even a cartoon animation of an event that occurred. But in that case, the news industry and the consumer are both comfortable with it because it's very clear that this is not reality. We're not trying to pass off something fake as something that actually happened.
All right.
So it's all about disclosure. It's all about transparency. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, please continue. Yeah. Okay. So we heard kind of several points that Sonali thinks journalists should fulfill for the audience to be able to trust them. And we have, 3 young people here who maybe will be journalists, but are maybe not yet or not currently, as in the case of Aryan, who is mainly a student. But I want to ask you, what is it that you need from journalists to be able to trust them? Do you kind of subscribe with what Sonali said, or is there something else so that AI in journalism seems like something you can trust? Any one of you who has an answer to that? Violetta, can I put you on the spot here? Because you were talking about how you as a news consumer want for all of it to be kind of traceable for you to be able to trust. So what is it that you would like to see in a news story that has used AI to some extent for you to be able to trust it?
I mean, as Sonali was saying, AI used in like a Google Doc, like to autocorrect words, I think is very different than AI used to create an image. I think clear markers, I mean, is a very basic but very important piece. Um, I personally don't know if I would be comfortable, like if I'm reading an article about like a current day news event, and rather than having actual footage, it's using AI generated footage because that is something that we can never truly know how it happened if we don't have footage of it. And if you use AI, that's just leaving so much to chance and creating something that even the slightest tweaks can be very important in how people perceive what happens. Um, but beyond that, I feel like for me personally, I can't know because I have yet to discover and encounter a lot of news that is either marked with AI and I therefore know it has AI or is unmarked with AI. Because if it has AI and it is not marked and I don't know, then I can't figure out how I feel if I'm going in blind, if that makes sense.
Yes, definitely. And that is something that sometimes happens, right? Like dishonest use of AI, not disclosing it fully. Arian, you have experience with that. Do you mind speaking about that a little bit?
Yes, of course. I've had this experience before, like especially when curating images. I've noticed that some of I'm not gonna name these photographers because they're my friends. Some of them I've used like the generative like text that Instagram offers to like users to like describe their images. And it's I mean when you read the news and when you read a lot of factual information, you will be able to really distinguish between what is AI generated and what is not. So because it all depends on your experience. And but for some people it could be very difficult to really recognize whether this is AI generated or not. Even though, like, I think Instagram labels it as AI made or AI generated text or photo. But for people, when once the image is disseminated or the information is disseminated to a large extent, it would be difficult for people to really understand whether this is truth or not. Because once it goes viral, it's out of hand. Like it would be impossible or it would be difficult for us to like recognize it in a short amount of time. It will take a lot of time for us to really fact check that. And I think since it's really difficult in these days to really define what is truth and what is not, I think relying on evidence and like in fact checking those text or images would be a good approach to really understand whether these like contents are like AI generated or not, and to really distinguish between false and truth.
Thank you so much. Johan, since this is also about education where people do tend to trust AI a little bit more, I want to ask you if this question of whether you can trust this AI generated information or not comes up in the classroom, and maybe you have some ideas to why educators are maybe trusted a little bit more with this.
Um, I think first of all, I want to say that we had this discussion when in the beginning of my career as a teacher when Wikipedia came. I think Wikipedia was the same discussion. Can we trust it? It's not the same, but it's similar. And I think one thing that you have in education, you have a teacher, and the teacher's role, I think it will change in the future. You will become more of a mentor, uh, where we have to train the students to know how to trust the text or not. I think actually I think the school has to change really uh, in the most ways because the teacher, um, AI as a time saver is great, and I think for me as a teacher, I can focus on reading is really important, writing is important, and I think it's if we trust it. I think we had the same discussion in school as well. We have a lot of teachers who I think the teacher use it, but we are not sure if the students shall use it. But we know they use it anyway because they have access to it outside of the school. So I think we have to cope with that. We have to. I think the most important thing is that we train the students to not trust everything they read. That discussion we had before AI as well. But I think in the education we see the benefits. We see it can do so many things for us to let us focus on important things like social sustainability instead of testing. We can, yeah.
Thank you. There's something kind of similar where AI could be used more in journalism too. Nikita actually is talking about a concept that is called AI first newsrooms. So what is it? How does that differ from what we have now? And does that take the feelings of the audience and their trust in consideration?
Yeah, thank you for that excellent question. I talk a lot about AI first newsrooms and this AI first transition that we're in, because comparing it to just how news was distributed previously, we were in a print first era where it was high editorial control, very slow cycle for news. Then we went to a digital first where suddenly you could have real-time updates and reach anyone on the globe as long as they had access to an internet and were able to go to your website. And now when we talk about AI first, it's a lot about what Sonali was talking about personalization, of being able to find news and creating a personalized news experience. And when I talk about AI first, it's really fundamentally talking about this transformative shift that we're going to see in modern journalism, and something that this is a group of young, hopefully journalists. The way we are thinking about journalism, the way we are doing news is going to fundamentally shift within our lifetime. Because if you just look about from a couple decades ago, you would never expect to get news on your phone. That was a completely new way of how news is going to be delivered. So we can't expect to be doing news the exact same way for the next few decades, right? And so when I talk about it in AI first, it's fundamentally framing it through three key dimensions when I talk about it. And AI first is really looking at that first concept, where AI is not just being bolted on to existing processes and doing things the way we naturally do and just adding and slapping AI on top of it, but it's rather a fundamental rethinking of how journalism is going to be distributed, it's going to be consumed in the age of AI. And that's why that emphasis is on the first. So it's talking about building in AI considerations into the foundations of how editorial and operational decisions are going to be made, because that's how, when we're thinking about AI, that's how it's going to be. So if you look about one area of the news production and editorial process, you're thinking about AI as an augmentation rather than a replacement of journalistic processes. You're thinking of AI as how Matt Carolean on the first episode of Newsroom Robots actually said from the Boston Globe, an Iron Man suit for a journalist, which is enhancing their capabilities to do a lot more work, still preserving that human integrity, being able to do a lot more investigative reporting, doing the key skills of journalism, which is being outside in the community, nurturing sources, and breaking news. And AI is helping you focus on all of these high value activities. The second point in this AI first newsroom is going to be about audience engagement and content distribution. AI really enables hyper-personalization at scale. And we are going to be seeing this over the next few years, because one of the main things about generative AI is it's more than just a technology transformation. It's really a revolution in the user experience of how of the information's ecosystem, in the way in which we get our news, the way we get our information. We're already seeing that. If you go onto Google, they just announced they are expanding AI overviews across 100 countries. And if you were in the US up until recently, if you go and search something, you get the AI generated summary. That's your information ecosystem starting to change, where AI is giving you summarizing information. So what we're seeing is that change in user experience. And third, one of the most important aspects of an AI first newsroom is going to be a business model innovation. AI tools are going to help create, and we're going to see maybe more new types of economic models, hopefully more sustainable economic models that's going to help enhance subscriber retention, being able to understand our audience a bit more in depth. And this is going to be like the components of an AI first newsroom really that I'm talking about. And we need to be thinking about rethinking journalism right now, about every single aspect of journalism and what does it look like in an AI era.
Oh man, so much change is coming. There could be a ton of questions I could ask, but the time is running by so fast, and we have a lot of very interesting questions from the audience. Maria, do you want to ask some?
Yes, great questions, everybody. I'm actually kind of picking up on what Nikita just said. We have a couple of questions that sort of follow on there, relating to AI potentially leading to people losing their jobs in an AI first newsroom, but also how is that going to impact the accuracy, the authenticity of journalism, if AI moves into sort of content writing jobs?
Yeah, when I talk about AI first, it's not just content writing, right? Journalism, at the end of the day, is about being out there, talking to people, finding facts, finding the truth, and putting that into a system. And it's about transforming the way in which people are going to be consuming news, the way in which you're going to be reaching people. And the honest answer about what AI is going to be, how AI is going to transform industries, is that it's going to likely lead to some role changes. And yes, there will be some positions that might not be necessary in the future, because if you think about every single technological disruption, that same thing happened. When you went in the print era to digital, all of the jobs that were required in print era were now evolved into new digital eras jobs. And so, but at the same time, there were so many more positions that were created for a digital first newsroom, editors for mobiles, social media, a whole audience engagement team that never existed in a print first newsroom. And it's going to be the exact same in an AI first newsroom. And so one of the crucial things about this is we need to look at the full picture in terms of how this is going to be enhancing journalism. There's going to be roles changing, but we're going to be focusing a lot more on key aspects of what journalism is. And journalism is more about the content that is there, the interaction that is there. You could have, as we're seeing already, a lot of like AI editorial teams who are very much working with journalists to help them find information from all of these sources, being able to create more product managers who are able to be that technological bridge in the newsroom. We're going to see a lot more jobs and roles that are needed for newsrooms in a digital first newsroom. And you will always have a human in the loop, and that's how we're going to be building trust. But when we talk about an AI first newsroom, it's something that we as an industry need to actively think, because journalism and the information ecosystem is going to actively change. The difference is going to be, it's going to be much more rapid than when we went from print to digital. And so at the same time, I think one of the main things that we as an industry and young people need to be thinking about is what are the skills that we need to be thinking about to prepare and future-proof our career. AI is going to be one of that, understanding the technology and understanding how it can help us in our work.
Thank you. Maybe merging a couple other questions here, maybe from more the education standpoint for our students and for Johan. Noting that AI helps in education, but how does it affect the creativity and unique works that students are producing? And kind of in tandem with that, maybe Johan, we'll start with you first. within that framework of how AI impacts creativity, are there any exciting or eye-opening uses of AI that you have specifically used in the classroom?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think it's important for me as a teacher to focus on the will to learn, and that the students are not supposed to let AI do things for them, because creativity is one of the most important things to increase learning, I think, and it can help us on the way. I think maybe come up with some ideas, give us feedback, but for most of the students, I think it's helpful on the way to the goal. But AI is not creative, but it can give you creative ideas, I think. Um, for instance, we have a lot of when we read literature, we can ask questions about the main characters. We can make interviews with the characters to understand the reading better, and we can see what happens with my text if I put it into a debate instead of a novel. And I think it gives students new perspectives and new ideas. In that way, I think it's creative.
Great. Eunice, maybe we'll come back to you. I'm curious your thoughts on this question of how AI impacts creativity. Do you see that with yourself in your schoolwork or among your classmates?
Yeah, sure. I can start with an example I've encountered in the past few days. There's this classmate of mine, sort of confidential, and well, okay, this is the thing. We had a lot of work to do, like we had 3 assignments to submit by 11:59, and it was really hectic to work on them all at once. And yeah, that guy of mine was he had spent some time not coming to school, so he was a little bit struggling back behind. So what he did is every work that he submitted was AI generated, like everything, copied the questions into ChatGPT and pasted them back into his document and submitted. I don't know how he did it, but luckily there was no similarity rate. He was not caught. But in the end, I approached him and said, so if you are asked that into the exam, like in the exam, they ask you the scenarios that were in the assignment, how are you going to do that? So I was like, I'm just going to think about it. But behind in my mind, I was like, yes, you're going to think about it, but you won't have enough time to generate your work, to think about some scenarios, like to produce something that is original, that is coming from you as yourself, as a student, as your point of view. You're just taking something that is general that anyone else, even myself, if I had pasted the questions to ChatGPT and gave me the answers would be a little bit similar. So there is no uniqueness because personally, I believe that AI is something, it's a human created thing. It's something that is created by humans. So I don't know if the person who created AI gave it that ability for it to think and innovate something as me, I could do it, or as you could do it. You could do that. It's definitely going to answer based on what is out there. Like, if we all know that during summer, let me give an example of Africa. During summer, there's likeliness of water shortage, and during the rainy season, water is abundant. That is a fact that is known. So if I'm going to do something, definitely, if I use AI, it's going to base on what is known out there. But maybe in Rwanda, as I'm Rwandese, in Rwanda, we have something unique. Maybe in summer there is this way of storing water and nobody faces the problem of water. That is like if I am to answer that question or maybe ask something else, I'm going to use the uniqueness and say, however, some countries have these or we have artists that do these. Yet AI is going to answer based on the general thing out there. So I think when we rely more on AI, with that uniqueness lacks. There is no there is no sweetness in somebody being invested in your work because it's too generous, something that is, yeah, you can read and understand it, that's it. But you don't get invested too much, like without it. Something that is created, like unique. That's
Yeah.
my point of view on that.
Thank you for sharing that. And we have a comment that came in on the Q&A that emphasizes that's such a good point about, as Andrew says, the real constraints and pressures on students and journalists working under unrealistic deadlines and how these models are trained. We do have several more questions. We're at the top of the hour. And if for our audience, I would love to get through a couple more of these questions. So if there are those of you who have to jump off, of course, thank you for the hour of your time. But let's try to get in at least maybe one or two more of these, if you don't mind us keeping you for a few more minutes. And I see, Aryan, there was a question specifically for you. You said earlier that some people in Afghanistan don't know what AI is. And do you think that AI is a challenge for the privileged?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Thank you, Amina, for asking that. I don't think that's a challenge for the privilege because if I define the privilege, those would be who have the logistics and the means to access AI. That would be like mobile devices, internet, and smartphones. I think personally that AI would be a challenge to the poor, like compared to the rich, and it would widen the gap in Afghanistan and in countries alike in the future. And that's a challenge for the poor people rather than to the privilege, I believe.
Thank you. And maybe we'll get, gosh, we have so many good points here. One last, actually, I'm going to ask this question sort of to everybody. I think this is an interesting question from an anonymous attendee who says, I truly enjoyed the early days of a more random exploratory internet. So not this personalized experience where ads were targeted, nor was content. Are there websites, apps, news portals where AI is not used or where AI is used to recreate that random experience? Like, is the internet still random anywhere? And how is that useful to newsrooms or educators?
So I can take a crack at that. The reason the internet is not as random is because if you can sell ads against specifically targeted groups, you can make a lot more money. Having said that, I don't know if the internet ever was truly random. Maybe in the very, very early years, but it's been like 25 years of serious targeting, serious segmenting and targeting in many different ways. There is a concept in machine learning that you should explore what the user is interested in rather than simply exploiting what you already know about them. So many news organizations do have an element of serendipity in their recommendation engine. So for example, to build on the example I had earlier, you might offer me news about Toronto, you might offer me news about the Indian diaspora, and you might notice I read a lot of recipes, so you might offer me another recipe, but the fourth article that you offer me might be a car review, just to gauge, oh, do you think she'd be interested in this as well? So there is still an element of serendipity in most good recommenders on the internet, because both the machine and the people designing the algorithm are smart enough to know that they don't know everything.
Excellent. Well, we've gone 5 minutes to overtime now, so I think we'll wrap things up here. I think we could probably have a part 2 of this session. So on behalf of everyone at News Decoder, we'd like to thank our panelists for your wonderful comments and thoughts and sharing your expertise. Thank you to everyone in the audience for coming. Decoder Dialogues are a monthly series, so we invite you to join us next month when our talk will be on climate on the heels of the COP29 summit taking place in Baku this year. We will convene another panel of students, journalists, professionals working in this space. So we do invite you to come, and you can find the registration information for that on our website at news-decoder.com. And thank you all once more. We'll have the recording and a follow-up article on this talk coming in a few days, so do check back. Thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the panelists.
Thank you.